Hello everyone, I'm Elfowls, and welcome to another match analysis for the Newport Noctowls in Season 12 of the Wooper Club League. Last time I looked at the Paldean semifinals against Greg and his Quiet Majesty, where Tyranitar and Great Tusk once again showed their dominance in that matchup for a 5-0 victory to move on to the playoffs. In the playoffs, rather. This time, I'm going to go over the finals of the Paldean Conference versus Steve and his Waterdeep Wobbuffets. First though, there is an elephant in the room, or I guess there are 3 elephants in the room. The first being that I'm recording this way after the end of the season, and the second being that there is already a video on the WCL main channel covering the match that I'm about to get into. But regardless of those 2 facts, I do think I have plenty of insight on this battle that should hopefully be new and interesting to you all. And the third elephant in the room, Great Tusk. Oh yeah, look at him. Love that guy. Anyway, this is a rematch pretty hot on the heels of our last match, which was just in the final week of the regular season. In that recent face-off, we basically played the positioning and trading game until I chipped his team down enough for a speed-boosted Iron Moth to clean up for the 4-0 win. This time, I think we're both trying to bring some new ideas. I have some different plans based on what I saw in the last match, so let's see how it goes down. We're dealing with the same team that Steve had last time, which consists of Weavile, a non-Terra Roaring Moon, Gengar, Sandy Shocks, Quaquaval, non-Terra Dragonite, Klefki, Scovillain, Orthworm, Scizor, and Torkoal. Same idea as before, his team features some physical heavy hitters with special breakers and pivots to punish any defensive answers I might have. This draft puts a lot of emphasis on the dragons, Dragonite and Roaring Moon, as sweepers, but they're set up all over this team to take advantage of its wall breaking. It looks like it's going to be a very offensive game plan, but there are ways to prep around it, and a couple of mons that I'm not too worried about. So we're going to start with Weavile, which Steve has not used much this season. It has a hard time making progress against my team, especially with 2 bulky waters to break through, but the nail in the coffin for this thing is that Roaring Moon does its job better, and I'm already putting in a lot of prep for Roaring Moon, so Weavile becomes pretty inconsequential. And then I can say similar things about Orthworm, which is probably the worst of the 3 steel types he has for the matchup. Outside of T-Tar, it doesn't really win any relevant matchups, and it's not particularly good at setting hazards just because it tends to lose to Great Tusk. Those 2 are kind of the only ones now that I don't think can really come. Everything else is viable. Klefki is still annoying. It can set hazards or screens or cripple something with Thunderwave, but I'm not too concerned about it. A lot of my team deals with it just fine. I'll just have to make sure I do have the coverage for it. And then the biggest change in my planning is that the Suncore, Torkoal, and Scovillain are kind of higher on my radar this time. I kind of disregarded them before, but Steve brought them anyway, and that kind of proved to me that they are viable. I do still think that Sun support is kind of tough to use against my team, since I do have a couple of Sun abusers, most notably Great Tusk, and I also have a Sand Setter to disrupt the weather. That being said though, I can't deny how good Sun support is for him. Roaring Moon and Sandy Shocks are already scary, and it gives those 2 a stat boost, and Scovillain is a great sweeper or breaker that, despite being disrupted by both Hydreigon and Tyranitar, wins a lot of matchups under the sun with strong grass moves. I did beat this last time by outspeeding it with Booster Energy Iron Moth, but I'm fully expecting Steve to EV Scovillain for that +1 speed boosted Iron Moth, and also give it Stomping Tantrum, which is quad super effective. So yeah, I do have several stops of this thing, but it can force progress if it's out under the sun. Alright, that's it before the top 6, and this top 6 is actually the exact same as the last time I fought Steve, and my thoughts haven't changed that much on them, so there's not too much to say here that I haven't already. Quaquaval is still a threatening setup sweeper that needs to find a way around Dondozo, but if it does, then it can become a major problem. Scizor is a great utility piece, priority user, and the only viable dragon resist for Hydreigon, so I'm expecting it. Sandy Shocks is a strong special pivot that exploits Dondozo, and Roaring Moon is a great physical pivot that forces Dondozo in and breaks down the rest of the team. And then Dragonite is as diverse as ever. Like I predicted last time, it didn't come with Dragon Dance, but because that set didn't look particularly viable, so instead it showed up with a special Life Orb Thunder set. This time I would still expect special coverage. A weakness policy set still sounds like the scariest thing to deal with, but I need to be prepared for anything. And lastly, I am still most afraid of Gengar as a special wall breaker that I have a hard time stopping. I actually used specially defensive Furgraf to keep it in check last time, but I'm expecting Steve to react to that and run Dark Pulse to catch Furgraf off guard. So I'm going to try and find a different answer for it this time. I'm going up against a very offensive strategy, so I'm building a team that can stand up to it defensively, which starts with Assault Vest Iron Moth. The idea of this set is to soft check a few different special things. We can switch in on Gengar and Scovillain to tank a hit and then either fire back with a hard hit of our own, or set up with Flame Charge to sweep the same way we did in Week 9, just with a turn of setup for that speed boost. The Terra this time is Ground, for a couple of reasons. This actually lets me check Sandy Shocks by trading a Ground weakness for an Electric immunity, and Terra Ground Terra Blast uses one move slot to hit both Gengar and Torkoal super effectively. Ground, Fire, and Fairy coverage is actually super effective into nearly my opponent's entire team. The only neutral hit is Scovillain, so this could work very, very well as a late game sweeper. So that looked like a really good bring, and the other no-brainer is Dondozo. This is practically the same physically defensive set as last time. I just needed to switch in on Roaring Moon, Quaquaval, and Scizor and deal chip damage with Rocky Helmet. The two offensive moves of choice are Body Press, which I need for Roaring Moon, and Earthquake, which is better coverage than Liquidation, at least under the sun. And to facilitate stronger body presses, I have Terra Fighting, which also doubles as a defensive typing for a couple of things. It resists Roaring Moon's Crunch, and is neutral to Grass and Electric, which look like good Terra types from something like Quaquaval to break through. I thought about going Terra Fairy here, since it resists both of Roaring Moon's dual stabs, but Fighting is importantly neutral to Iron Head, which I think Roaring Moon is liable to run specifically in preparation for a Terra Fairy Dondozo. That plus Stab Body Press actually looks pretty nice in this matchup. And next up we have Hydreigon, which gets perfect coverage between Draco Meteor plus Flamethrower for the 3 Steel types. And we're going max special attack modest, so those Dracos are going to hurt. I really wanted to run Specs just to emphasize that damage, but I didn't actually need the power boost against many things, and I didn't love the idea of having to read Scizor or Klefki coming in and locking myself into the wrong move. So instead, the item of choice is Eject Pack, which gets some surprise momentum in front of specifically Dragonite. I am EV to outrun Jolly Dragonite, so I can Draco for big damage and get out of there before it can hit back. And then after that, hopefully it's crippled for the rest of the match, and I'm free to just click Itemless Draco next time. The other 2 move slots were free to dedicate to utility, so I went with Stealth Rock to make this my hazard setter, since Hydreigon tends to force a lot of switches, and U-Turn, which is good momentum overall and still lets me act as a pivot after the Eject Pack is consumed. And the Terra type is Steel, which helps against Roaring Moon, and I guess Dazzling Gleam on Gengar, but with 2 great Terra candidates already, and Hydreigon's naturally good typing against Sandy Shocks and Scovillain, I don't see this as a premier Terra option. We've also got a Tyranitar, who is running a Choice Scarf set with speed for Gengar and Adamant Roaring Moon. And this is here to soft check a few different things. The first being Gengar, which I can switch in on relatively safely and then KO back with Earthquake. I really like the Scarf for this reason, since Gengar is actually reasonably likely to stay in and go for Focus Blast, so we can hopefully get a surprise KO on it by outspeeding. The Scarf is also really helpful for a Scovillain, since it means that no matter what, as long as T-Tar is alive, Scovillain can't sweep, since we negate the Sun and then outspeed with a Rock move. T-Tar also helps out against Dragonite with Sand and Rock Blast to bust through Multiscale in the 1v1, and hopefully prevent the Dragonite from setting anything up. And then Brick Break is for Klefki screens, as well as super effective damage on Roaring Moon and Orthworm. And finally, Stone Edge is my strongest move in case the multi-hit Rock Blast isn't safe enough to gamble on. I really like this set. It's great insurance against some really threatening mons and has some nice surprise factor to it as well. Then we've got Azumarill. This is an Assault Vest set that is EV to always survive a Timid Specs Gengar Sludge Bomb from full, and it can also take any one hit from Sandy Shocks. This set isn't it's mainly here to keep other things in check, though its presence means that Roaring Moon isn't free to spam Dragon moves, and it also forces committal options from Dragonite. The end goal is just to trade positive with something and apply pressure on the Dragons. The moveset is pretty standard, Dual Stabs plus Aqua Jet as priority, and Brick Break is mostly filler, but it helps against potential screens from Klefki. And we're Terra Fairy, which boosts up Play Rough while getting out of the weakness to Electric and Grass that Steve might be looking to exploit. Pretty basic set. Moving on, we have Great Tusk, running a very Spadef set with leftovers this time. The main purpose here is to have something that can check both Roaring Moon and Sandy Shocks, since every answer I had to one was threatened by the other. With especially defensive spread, Great Tusk can switch in on Sandy Shocks semi-safely, especially if we can come in on an electric move, and with just max HP, Great Tusk does stop Roaring Moon from making too much progress. Earthquake and Ice Spinner get pretty great coverage aside from Earthworm, which I'm not expecting to come, so the rest of the set was mostly filler. Rapid Spin is hazard removal, and of course setup, alongside another setup move in Bulk Up. We do actually have enough speed to outrun Roaring Moon at +1, so there's a chance I can set up on that with a Rapid Spin and then a Bulk Up for something of a late game sweep, maybe even with help from the Sun, since Photosynthesis boosts our attack. A Bulk Up set, a sweep for that matter, isn't all that realistic, but that isn't really the main point of the set. It's really just meant to be a soft check to the Photosynthesis mons. So that's a team. You'll probably notice that I use the words soft check to describe a lot of my team slots, and that was kind of my building philosophy for this battle. The Wobbuffets have a lot of big offensive threats that can make a lot of progress if left unchecked, so I wanted to make sure I have a lot of options to deal with every big threat. With that said, let's head right into the battle. Alright, here we are. The Sun Core does show up with no Scizor and no Gengar, which really caught me off guard. I thought that would be Steve's best breaker in the matchup, but I guess he's going to go with Scovillain as a special breaker instead. That's fine, I did prepare some more Sun answers for this battle. Looking around at a lead matchup though, Hydreigon looks great to start dropping unresisted Dracos, but I think I'll save that for a little later. I'm kind of fearing the lead Dragonite, which is what Steve did last time, so I'm looking for an answer to that. Azumarill is a decent option, but I think I'm going to try T-Tar, which is already a soft Dragonite check, and is also a lot more expendable with no Gengar, so let's just lead with it. Roaring Moon. That's not a great start for me. Earthquake is likely, and U-Turn is even more likely if he has it, so Dondozo is a tempting switch for me, but honestly I don't feel like losing momentum that early. T-Tar should survive a non-banded Earthquake pretty comfortably, so I think I'm okay going for damage. Like I said, Tyranitar's health is kind of expendable without Gengar around, so I'll go for Brick Break for the super effective damage. Roaring Moon, it does go for a U-turn, and because that's not band damage, I'm thinking this is Scarfed. And then it's going to go out to Torkoal, which was very surprising to me. I wish I had gone for Stone Edge there, which has the same power on Roaring Moon as a super effective Brick Break, but Brick Break was kind of my attempt to catch a Rock Resist for some damage. Super weird to me that he would risk his Torkoal like this on a potential Rock move, but I guess it paid off for him. Looking at my switch into this, I actually don't have much. I don't know what coverage this Torkoal is running yet, so Hydreigon is pretty scared of Body Press. Iron Moth fears Earthquake, and both Great Tusk and Azu would hate to get burned on the switch-in, so I guess Dondozo, we can take a hit and I can rest off a burn later. And we're just going to switch in on the rocks, which makes sense. From here, I actually just like going for Earthquake. Chipping down Torkoal would be pretty great for later, and Earthquake does catch most of the natural switch-ins that I would see to Dondozo. Switch-ins such as Sandy Shocks, which I am more than happy to take damage on. That actually did less than I was expecting though, so I wonder if this thing is running a little bit of bulk. Regardless, I can't really stay in here, so I need a switch in. My options basically boil down to Great Tusk, which is immune to Volt Switch, and Hydreigon, which is immune to Earth Power. I will also note that a very similar situation happened in our last battle, in which I did swap Great Tusk in on this and then blocked the Volt Switch. So I think Steve is going to be ready for that this time, and try to catch Great Tusk with an Earth Power. Let's try to go Hydreigon for that reason. Take rocks, but we do switch in on the Earth Power, very nice. Now, unless this is Terra Ice again, I'm not too threatened here, so I have a free turn. A Draco is tempting since it's unresisted, but I think I'd rather go for my rocks. A Dragonite is most likely Boots, but Steve brought 2 fire types, and those would be heavily punished for not bringing Boots of their own. Sandy Shocks does Volt Switch out, so no choice item, and Dragonite comes in as I set my rocks. And this is where Eject Pack comes in handy. Draco is still super free here. I'd love to get damage on this, so I'm not even going to think about it. Draco is going to come out. And a crit for almost 70%, and I eject right out into Azumarill, as Dragonite, interestingly enough, roosts up. That's definitely a good turn for me, but looking at the calcs, something isn't adding up. That Draco was supposed to do that much damage to standard Dragonite without a crit, and looking into it further, that's definitely a full special defensive Dragonite. That's crazy. That makes the crit pretty unfortunate for him with the play he went for, considering he's no longer at full. He would have been if the Draco didn't crit and he roosted. But with no attack investment anyway, I think this was kind of losing to Azu anyway, so it's fine. I'll go for Play Rough, since even if he switches out, I'm getting really nice damage on something. Even the Torkoal, which resists with high defense, doesn't want to take rocks plus a Play Rough. No switching, so Thunder from the Dragonite in the Sun misses, and Play Rough KOs. I gotta say, that's tough luck for Steve, especially right after the crit, but 50% is a tough risk to ask for. Anyway, Dragonite down 6-5 game, and curiously enough, Quaquaval is the revenge. And looking through Quaquaval's moveset, I think it's pretty clear that this is Steve's Terra of choice, since it wouldn't be able to do anything to Azu otherwise. I can't really do much about that though. If I think he's going with Terra Electric or Terra Grass, then Dondozo is absolutely not a switch-in, and this thing's base stabs hit the rest of my team super effectively. And depending on investment, I think Azu might be able to live a super effective Terra Blast, so it might be worth staying in and attacking. I'll go for the Play Rough. Substitute. Play Rough breaks that, and we don't see any leftovers or anything. I guess Steve was trying to make a read on a switch, but we're just in the same situation, so I suppose I will Play Rough again. Another sub, and Play Rough misses. Well, that sucks. I guess it makes up for the Draco crit a little bit, but is this what Quaquaval was fishing for? If I knew it was going for that, I would have just switched in Dondozo, but I don't think I could have risked it on the potential super effective hit. I guess I should try to break the sub? But that is a Terra Grass Terra Blast, and Azumarill goes down 5-5. Well, that sucks, but regardless of how we got here, that's a Moxie boost for a +1 attack wall breaker with super effective coverage for my whole team. I'm going to have to use my Terra to deal with this, aren't I? So, I can bring in Dondozo. Pretty easy choice to Terra Fighting to only take 19% from the grass move, and the first body press does break the sub. I'll have to take another move, it's a close combat, but then another body press can just easily take out the Terra threat, although Dondozo isn't looking too good after that, as Sandy Shocks is in next. Since I definitely want to save Dondozo to help deal with the Roaring Moon later, I am essentially back in the same 50-50 between Great Tusk and Hydreigon, and I'll pick Great Tusk this time. We're kind of mixing it up, this is mostly a coin flip read, but Great Tusk can take an Earth Power if we have to. We're actually going to come in on the sunny day, though. That's a cool use of the free turn, I guess. I'm happy to take the sun-boosted Earthquake damage on something, though. Nothing is going to want to switch in on this, so Sandy Shocks will just go for a boosted Earth Power, which kind of hurts before going down to the Earthquake for a 5-3 game. It's unfortunate that Azumarill is gone, and both Dondozo and Great Tusk are below half, though, since Roaring Moon is starting to get pretty scary. But look at what my opponent has left. His Weather Setter and 2 Abusers, when my Weather Setter is still alive to cancel out the sun, so I think I'm still in a good position, as something comes in as a revenge. It's a Scovillain, which takes that nice Rocks chip. This is fine. I have Iron Moth to resist either stab move, and I really doubt he's going for Stomping Tantrum on this turn. If he does, you got me. But it is just a Solar Beam, which gets a pretty irrelevant crit. He probably knows that I'm Assault Vest now, if he's calcing, and I always double out to Hydreigon here. I know you have the ground move. And there it is, the Stomping Tantrum. From here, I should survive any move, so let's just drop Draco. I do barely live this Fire Blast here, and Draco gets the job done. 5-2 game, as the sun goes down. Steve kind of has to send in Torkoal here. I get that, it makes sense to set the sun back up, and I need to assess the game state really quick. How do I lose, basically? Steve's only option at this point is to play for that Roaring Moon. We know it's not banded, so the only way it sweeps through Dondozo and Great Tusk with their beefy defense stats is with Outrage under the sun for that Photosynthesis boost. He's actually found a decent opportunity to play around a little bit, since I'm in with -2 Hydreigon, which doesn't look like it KOs either Torkoal or Roaring Moon right now. I could be wrong about Torkoal. So I think his play is to either go out into Roaring Moon and start breaking, or Rapid Spin with Torkoal first to remove the rocks, counting on living the Draco, and then go into Roaring Moon on the -4 Draco with Torkoal still in the back. Of course, then I think Torkoal's Rapid Spin would KO me anyway, and then I would be able to handpick my revenge for the best position possible. Either way, it seems like my best play is to Draco. Despite not KOing either target, it cripples whichever one it hits. It still does a lot of damage. Torkoal goes down into Rock's range, so if it doesn't Rapid Spin, it's kind of doomed. or Roaring Moon most likely goes down into Rocky Helmet range, and then we can figure out the best path from there. Steve is going to go out into Roaring Moon, and the Draco crits for the 1-hit KO. Yeah, I guess that is one way to wrap up the game. Sorry about that, but like I said, it did look like Roaring Moon would have gone down to the helmet chip after that anyway, if it had just hit for normal damage. Still unfortunate. With Torkoal as the last Pokemon on my opponent's side, I will just let Hydreigon go down. I'll just grab the damage, not hit the KO on the Torkoal with the Draco. Go down the Body Press, and this last KO could go to any one of my Pokemon, but I'll feed the KO leader by letting Great Tusk come in, and Rapid Spin for the final KO. Remove those pesky rocks. And that is a 4-0 game. GG to Steve. This was a closer game than the differential would suggest, considering that Roaring Moon was in fact scarfed, and my team was dangerously close to getting swept by Outrage. That said though, I think by the end I had the tools to outlast an Outrage sweep, especially between Sand Setup and Dondozo, probably having just enough HP to tank a hit. Not sure, but I guess it just didn't come down to that anyway. It was a pretty simple game, you know. Played pretty intuitively, made a few reads, but I think my prep kind of carried the way here. Hydreigon was absolutely the MVP though, pivoting in on multiple occasions and doing tons of damage with Draco, albeit with a few lucky crits. Sorry about that again. Yeah, I was very happy with that set. Still though, yeah, it was just tough for my opponent to play around, and that eject pack was so fun to use. And that is the Paldean finals over, which means that the Noctowls move on to the finals against the winner of the other conference, Michael and the Route 1 Burbs. Join me for that video. I'm not sure how in depth I'll cover that match, since I already spoke about it over on the Wooper Club main channel in that analysis, but I will be covering the end of my season in some form with my own video, hopefully soon. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.